Hey, Joseph Mullins is going to be our guest again tonight. We're going to show the same opening clip as we count down to the live stream. If you're watching this on replay and you've already seen that first 10 minutes, skip it. But if you haven't seen this, then you need to. It talks about a lot of things about the video production process and shares some of Joseph's great knowledge with us. Tonight, we're going to give away some things. Joseph has agreed to give away some things. If you'll pay the postage, maybe get some nice microphones and also some motion graphics that he will do for one lucky winner. I'm looking forward to that and see who wins it tonight. Welcome, and we'll see you in about 10 minutes.
Now, as a woodworker or any sort of maker, you wouldn't go out and start working on a project and start making cuts into wood before you've drawn out the thing you're going to build on a piece of paper. And once you've drawn it out, put measurements down, you wouldn't start cutting wood until you've made a cut list. One mistake that beginners make when getting started in video production is they shoot everything. They'll have 20 different shots of a 10-second clip from all sorts of different angles. That is unnecessary. Take your viewer's avatar, what we talked about, what is your typical viewer, and define what it is they're trying to get out of that specific video. Is it to be entertained? Is it to learn something new? And what is their understood or inherent knowledge? If they're woodworkers, they don't need to see the video of you pulling wood or metal off of a shelf. They've done it before and they know how a miter cut works. So let's make a plan and let's talk about the 4 steps to making a plan. The first piece in this 4-step process to me is the most important. It's the outline. It's 7th grade English, basic knowledge. Well, not basic, but it's kind of involved. You're going to take all of your information from your brainstorming session that's all out of order and incoherent, and you're going to put it into a flow of how to get from point A to point V. Let's take a look at this in action. Each line in it is a thought, and each thought should have motivation on getting to the next thought or the next line in your outline. Now, you don't have to have everything in your first run through on the outline. You just want to get the basic information of your brainstorming and everything out of your head onto a piece of paper and put it into sections like the intro, point A, point B, etc., going down the line. And when you create these letters and numbers, they will actually be used in the next section, which is a little scary for some folks, storyboarding. Now, if you want to practice this before we move on to storyboarding, let me give you an exercise. If you've never heard of it, Google the peanut butter jelly experiment or the peanut butter and jelly lesson. Imagine you had an alien or somebody who didn't know what a peanut butter and jelly sandwich was, and you have to explain to them what it takes to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. How much information does your viewer avatar already have? That's the information you put into your outline. Now, once you have your outline established, you move on to the storyboard. Now, I know a lot of people are scared of storyboards because you're not an artist. Don't worry about it. I use stick figures. I'll use pictures from my phone. I'll use pictures from old videos. You can even use storyboardthat.com and use their clip art. You're going to take the letters and numbers that were from the outline, and maybe you've made some adjustments, maybe you've rewritten your outline again at this point, and you don't have to make a cell for every single piece of the outline, but you can group them together to make sure that you have the visuals in place so that whenever it's time to shoot, you can keep your creativity focused on your actual maker project and not where the camera goes and what the shot needs to look like. That'll be defined on the storyboard. Also part of this pre-production elements, the third item is the script, taking some of the items from the storyboard, because the storyboard, we've added a little bit of dialogue into it. There's 2 main styles of scripts. You have ENG news style 2-column video on one side, audio on the left, which is normally your voiceover or sound effects. The other is film style, where it's more of voiceover words and then you have visual cues in between. You don't have to write your script word for word, because if you're like me and you improv, you can write just your opening sentence, your opening line that you might have worked on, and the rest of it make it bullet points, and then write out whatever your closing line will be. This right here gets you ready for your shot list. Now, before I get to the next piece, which is the most important tool in helping you save time in production and in editing, let me ask you to hit the like button. This is brand new. These are the first videos of this channel, and I really want to hit the ground running. Hit that like button and let me know that you want to see more content like this. The shot list is the most important piece past the outline. It is where you organize exactly what shots in what locations. This, if you are a woodworker, is like your cut list. If you're an engineer, this is like your bill of materials. This is everything that you need to cover to do your video and nothing else. There's no superfluous shots provided on the shot list. The best practice is not necessarily to write the shot list in order, but organize it by location, or maybe location and shot. This allows you to shoot completely out of order as long as your project allows for that to happen. You can get all of your cut shots in one. You can get all of your glue up shots done in one. What's great about this is you have the file name, or maybe you don't have the file name, but you're filling this out so it essentially becomes an assembly list in editing. And it makes editing a breeze. You don't have to watch through 3 different takes and 3 different intros, because on your shot list you marked only do take 3, and you don't have to watch takes 1 and 2 and 4 and 5. Now, I've made a temporary template for you to download on joejax.com, but after working on the shot list for this, I realized a lot of things are out of. 3-point lighting does not mean 3 balls, but rather sources from 3 directions. The first of these 3 is your key light. It could be the sun, a studio light, a window, anything that is your main light at 100% of the light needed. Let's fill in this shadow, but not erase it, by adding a fill light around 70 to 80% of the key's power based on the distance from the subject. Now, if your added light erases the shadow, you simply have 2 key lights, not a key and a fill. The third point is the backlight, whose purpose is to give definition, maybe like a 3rd dimension look to the subject. Let me make this a little easier, and I'm going to turn the backlight red so it stands out better. See, that line right there on the edge is what gives your subject definition. In a workshop, you won't use 3-point lighting, or will you? Overhead strip lights are actually your key light in full flood mode. Their reflections are acting as a low quality fill backlight, but you're still missing a real fill light, and that's where the raccoon eyes come from these overhead shop lights. These shadows you see right below your eyebrows are made worse the higher your ceiling is from you. This animation is simulated at 8 feet, and if we move up, this is 11 feet. To fix this, all you have to do is add a small underlight, and you don't have to shine it directly on and go full Morticia Adams. You just need a little bit to ease the shadows. And all right, I know this is just a simulation, and in a moment I'm going to take you out to the shop so you can see this in real life. But before we go out to the shop, I need to cover a few more specs. When lighting your workshop, the color temp of your lights is not the only thing to think of. Lumens, lux, and CRI are just as important. Lumen is the measure of total light from the source in all directions. Lux is the measure of the light on a surface. For professional lighting, this is usually 1 meter square area lit from 1 meter away. An old school 60-watt bulb might have 500 lumens. This studio light that I'm using is 4600 lumens, but it's 4100 lux at 1 meter. CRI, or color rendering index, is the effect light has on the true color representation of the material or subject. Let's simulate this with 2 lights and 2 pieces of paper. As you see, if I shine a white light you have a white piece of paper and a red piece of paper. If I shine only the red light, you see we have 2 red pieces of paper. The closer the CRI number is to 100, the more true the color is. Now, I shoot in a 5000 to 5600K setup in my shop or in here with a CRI of 94 to 96. But in my workshop, I keep 3500 degree color temp lights because it's a lot more pleasing and enjoyable for me during day-to-day action. And speaking of the shop, I think it's time to go.
Hey, welcome. We're trying to make Monday nights great. Glad you have joined us. And if you're watching this on replay, I'm glad that you came to see it. We will try to make Monday nights great tonight. I have a great guest. He was here last week, gave us some knowledge on pre-production, and he's going to expand on that knowledge tonight. I'm very excited to get him on here. Let's get him introduced. So he's got joejax.com. He is Joe Jax on YouTube. He has worked on Adult Swim, CNN, and Cartoon Network. If you've watched these shows like through Netflix, chances are you've seen his work. Please help me welcome back Joseph Mullins.
Hey, makers, welcome everybody. Glad we've got a fun holiday behind us, and I hope everybody's ready to learn something new tonight.
Yes, I know I am. I've got my pen and paper ready to take some notes because I think you're going to get into a lot of subjects. We did have a few questions that came forward from last week.
Okay.
First of all, I just thought I'd read through those. I think it's things that you're going to address anyway.
Yep.
But if you know Sandy from McKenzie Lumber Mill had asked, she has an editor, and what is the best way to hand off files to the editor so that they can pick it up and edit right away? And I think you're going to address some file management type items.
Yep.
We had a few other questions. What's the best tips for reducing editing time? And what's the best way to approach color grading and corrections as a beginner? And how would you recommend we preserve and store footage long term? And I think you've got some answers for us on that.
Color grading as a beginner. And then the fourth one was long-term storage.
Yes.
And that's our first 4 questions. And just to remind everybody, I'm going to try my best not to look at the questions in the chat. I'm going to let RT bring them up because last week I cringed to go back and critique myself, but my ADHD absolutely kicked in. I made sure to take extra meds tonight so I can stay focused because the content we're going to talk about tonight is, to some people, this is going to it's going to be like memorizing pi. I don't have a good analogy. It's extremely technical, but it is hugely important to growing your channel. What we're going to talk about tonight is not interesting to a new YouTuber, but if you had known this stuff before you hit record for the very first time, your production life would have been magically catapulted to level 10. So,
yeah. And before you dive into it, you've been very generous in offering to give away a couple of microphones if the winner will pay the freight or the shipping. Then they can get we're going to give somebody a chance to win a blue snowball, which is probably a $50 value, you said?
Yep, on a boom arm. So it was my previous one. Yep.
And then also a Rode Video Mic Pro.
Yep, the old Video Mic Pro, which is still in existence. It was the predecessor. Well, in my audio video that launched this morning, you can see all the comparison of 12 different microphones from voiceover to shotguns. And that's the Jojax video that launched this morning was all audio equipment.
Yeah. And you've also agreed to build some motion graphics for a third winner.
Yep.
And so that is a very valuable giveaway as well. All those are coming later in tonight, but you need to be here in order to win. So please stick around. And there's going to be questions along. It's not going to just be random draw, but we're going to add a little intrigue to it and ask a question along with it. Make sure you've been paying attention to these broadcasts last week and this week.
The early birds will actually get a little leg up on folks, because I love the people who come early or on time. In my video production classes, my professor was 1960s, 70s, and 80s New York NBC at 30 Rock, as a producer. And we had atomic clocks there in the classrooms, just like what I had at Turner Broadcasting and at Cartoon when I worked there. And if class started at 10 a.m., at 9:59:59, that giant lead door with sound deadening would close. And if you weren't there when that clock hit, you didn't get into class for that day. So there was actually a lot of fun we'd have before class. And for those of y'all who showed up early, RT's going to give you the secret password to win one of these awesome prizes at the end of the night.
Absolutely. So whenever it gets time, I'll let you know now that to win the Rode Video Mic Pro, sorry, hard for me to say that for some reason, Video Mic Pro, which is like $180 value if you're willing to pay the shipping charge on that. The code for that will be #Jojax, and you're going to need to be able to tell us. You'll put in #Jojax and then tell us how he came up with that name. Last week he shared that with us. He shared that story. So how did Joseph come up with the name Jojax? And so
don't put it in the chat.
That's your big clue. You're going to put #JOJAQS.
I guess they do have to put it into the chat at some point. So yeah. So I guess early and often get them in there and then put a whole bunch of comments so the chat goes up and nobody can see what you put in there.
And we'll come on and announce the others a little bit later. But yes, having watched last week is going to pay off for you this week.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, Joseph, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you start shining some light on some of these subjects like frame rate and bit rate.
Right. Absolutely. And I'll call out to you when we need to go over to my screen. But right now, I'm just going to dive into some foundational knowledge you need before you even hit record. So what I'm talking about today really is hugely important for before you even hit record. And I'll make sure to take a break here after I get through a topic to check the chat for questions. And I'm going to try to hide my camera because I am looking dead at myself and it is very distracting, like Fabio tonight. So what we're going to talk about first is frame rates, bit rates, resolution, codecs, compressions, intraframe, long GOP, short GOP, and color sampling. I'm going to try to cover all of that in one quick bit at the bare bone basic knowledge. So we're going to start with frame rates of codecs and compression. So go back if you I'm doing a quick refresher. I actually went back and watched it twice, the hour and some that Suman did with RT on this channel back in January. go ahead and put a note in your notebooks to go back and watch that episode. There is so much gold information that Suman dives down into, frame rates, going 24 and 30 frames, color space, lighting, going through camera equipment, actual models. That's what I had pitched to RT to do this week. And then he said, go back and check this one. Realize how much gold that was back in January. I wish Suman was here tonight so he could chime in with the link. But seriously, go back, watch back in January, Woodcraft with Suman doing the live stream. I'm going to build onto that, and we're going to talk about, let's start with frame rates. So in your nonlinear editor, you've seen drop frame and non-drop frame. So let's just immediately establish that I'm going to talk about 24, 30, and 60. I'm not going to talk about 25 and 50 because we are not in PAL and CCAM. We're not in Europe and Australia. So we are in NTSC or ATSC broadcast, where we work in 24, 30, and 60 frames per second. Now, again, go back and see Suman's video. He explains persistence of vision and the whole reason we have the frame rate. Now, there is a difference between drop frame and non-drop frame. I shoot everything 2997 drop frame. That means that I am shooting 30 frames a second, and I should have Googled the math, every so many seconds, it drops one frame of video, because the way that broadcast NTSC established in 1953, there was latency because audio could travel faster than light, or it took up less bandwidth. I know in real life, light travels at 186,000 miles per second, where sound is like 700 and some miles an hour, but it takes less bandwidth to do audio. So drop frame was created because what would happen is, in a 30-minute broadcast, you would have lip sync issues. And some of you in cheaper editors, non-linear editors in NLE, you might see some of those issues. So by shooting, because almost every camera you're going to work with is going to shoot in drop frame. If it's 30 drop frame, it's 29.97 frames per second. How about this? Drop frame is a leap year. That is a great analogy. Thank you, pat myself. Drop frame is a leap year. So it takes 365.2 days to go around the sun in an orbit, or I don't know. So I'm a video guy. Google science. Drop frame is because every so many seconds, they figured out if they drop one frame of video, so 1/30th of a second, they could keep audio and video aligned. So if you're shooting 24 frames a second, it's 23.976. If you're shooting 60 frames a second, it's 59.94, which is obviously double of 2997. So understand, you are not just shooting 29.97 frames, you're actually shooting 30 frames, but every so many seconds, one frame is dropped. I hope I have hammered that nail deep into it. I'm going to check to make sure there's no questions I need to hit real quick. Nope, everything looks good.
Don't see any questions.
Okay, so now that we've set our frame rate, resolution is super easy. If you're shooting in 1080, you're 1920 by 1080. If you're shooting in QHD, it's quad HD. It's 4 blocks of HD. So that's 3840 by 2160, I think. If you're shooting 4K, that's where you get the little VITSI information. It's just outside of QHD. I'm not going to go into why that happens, but once we went from NTSC broadcast that died in 2008 to a wild west of 30 different codecs and compressions, understand that now we're getting into 6K, 8K, and beyond. Just stick with whatever your camera does. Either QHD is most likely what it is, because it's 4 times a 1080 signal. That's your resolution. Your bit rate, this is where it gets into what's important. Your bit rate is how many bits that moment in time takes to complete the image. And you want to do a variable bit rate if you want the best compression. And remind me to come back to CBR and VBR when we talk about exporting towards the end, because I'm going to explain your bit rate. But understand that your camera is going to have a specific bit rate. Some of them you can change as you go, and you'll notice if you have a smaller bit rate, then you have a smaller file size. And you're wondering, how can a 4K video be 1 gigabyte and this other 4K video be 4 gigabytes or 8 or even larger? And it's because the resolution is still 4,000 lines left to right, 2,000 lines top and down, or let's just go to 1080. Forget about 4K. We're going to talk about 1080 because it's more standard. It's easier to talk about. So we have 1,000 lines of resolution going up and down, but our bit rate is kind of like your internet. If you have a lower bit rate, like I only have 100 megabit, then, well, which is a lot compared to DSL when it was 5 megabit, it's more information being consumed. So if I have a higher bit rate, then I am providing more video signal. How do I make this a little simpler? Let me skip bit rate and go into all I intraframe and your MP4 codec of a reference frame. I don't know if anybody has seen that. Hopefully you've dove into your nonlinear editor at some point and saw that you can do an intra frame at a specific time. Or where else would you have seen that? In your camera. So if you have a Canon camera, there at 1080, there's 1080-30 all I and 1080-30 intra. So what happens is, in certain codecs and in certain compressions, you will have reference frames. If you take AVI, MOV, DNX from Avid, all of these are no GOP or short GOP codecs. They are all I-frame codecs, which means 30 frames a second. I literally have 30 pictures in that file. I could export that out and have 30 JPEGs that are 1920 wide, 1080 tall. That's what you want to edit in. But 30 individual frames of video is a lot of file information. So what they created when they mixed an MPEG, it was two different groups. I won't get into the technical, but H.264 comes from two different groups who got together and built an algorithm to say, if my intra-frame rate is 90 frames, that means that I have one full picture that is 1920 by 1080. So it's 2 megabytes or megabits for the pixels. And then the next 89 frames of video are just the data that was different from the frame before. You have seen this without realizing it. You might have watched a sports broadcast where all of a sudden it turns pink and you just see the guy running across a pixelated screen. What's happened is it has lost its intra-frame reference frame, and it's just sending the data bits of what's different. I'm going to take a pause real quick, let RT jump back on, so make sure I don't go too much there.
No, it's that is, for somebody who's not familiar with those terms, that is a lot. That is a lot of information coming at me. Somebody who is more familiar would not be so overwhelmed with the terminology. But whenever you are talking about the pink showing up and everything, that makes sense now. That it's an image in time. Mm-hmm. And then after that, the data just tells it what has changed since that image, right?
Yep. So here's what happens when you're editing. So while you're editing, if you had all I frames, all intra frames, which means you were in the largest file that it would be for whatever your bit rate is. If you are doing that and you needed to make a cut, let's say you had a a piece of video that was 5 seconds long and you needed to cut it at frame 96. If it is a MOV, AVI, QuickTime, if it is a no GOP, short GOP, and I'll talk about the GOP here in a second. If it is an all I frame codec, all intra frame, then it is making a cut at an actual frame of video. And it's as if I just had a stack of photos that I'm throwing away. But if I am editing an MP4 video out of a Canon camera that says I'm using the small compression on it, or I'm editing a YouTube video or an export that somebody's given me, what's happened is if the intra frame, the reference frame was at frame 90, your nonlinear editor has to go to frame 90. And if you were making the cut at frame 96, the processor has to look at frame 90, which was the reference frame, and then look at frames 91, 2, 3, 4, and 5 before it can go to 96. And so having MP4s that are not all iframe video in your nonlinear editor is actually more taxing than having a massive file size. So what happens before I started shooting in all iframes, or if somebody gives me a piece of content that has been compressed with H.264, I will feed it into my media encoder, into Handbrake, into QuickTime, into whatever application you can use to convert video. Handbrake is a free one on Mac that's pretty epic. I can't remember what's on PC that's free. I will convert it into a all I. If I'm on PC, it's AVI. If I'm on Apple, it's an MOV file into QuickTime, probably ProRes. And then once I'm done with my edit, I can get rid of that big file, go back to the original one, and just change the proxy settings in the nonlinear editor. But having all iframe video will make your editing go 3 times as fast because your computer isn't having to process 6 frames at once. It's only processing 1.
Okay, so a lot of people on YouTube are using some type of nonlinear editor, right?
Hope so. If it's linear, so just for you all who don't know what a nonlinear, this one's really quick enough to jump off yet, RT. Nonlinear editing is VHS. That's when you were dubbing something over and you had to go in a line, like making a copy of a CD or a tape, and you played and you hit record on something. And then while you're in a line, you add something else. Nonlinear means I can have this cut and put this thing before it and something else after it and something on top. So it is a non-linear editor instead of a tape, which is a linear editor.
Yep. So for the giveaway of the blue snowball on the boom, the mic on a boom, if you're willing to pay the shipping, go ahead and put in the comments hashtag NLE for your nonlinear editor, the hashtag NLE space, and then tell us what editor you're using. Is it DaVinci Resolve or whatever?
Premiere Pro, Final Cut, Sony Vegas, Media 100, Avid, whatever your nonlinear editor is.
Yep.
I've got a question here from Hillbilly Chic. I'm writing it down. Interlaced versus interframe. I can't believe I didn't talk about this back. Interlaced video is original broadcast. And I love diving into this. I apologize for getting really geeky. I wish I could show you guys the tattoo on my chest of a floor model TV set that says rest in peace, 1953 to 2009. But interlaced codecs is NTSC original from 1953, Philo Farnsworth, this corn farmer, I think, started looking at the lines out in his field. An original video, how they got the cathode ray tube to reproduce the signal properly, was in 480 signal, which is 525 lines. They had 256 lines here, 256 lines, or 256 and a half, and then there's a handful of lines that are for VITSI information and ghosting and anti-alien, like a whole lot of technical things, or the little white bits. If you watch This Old House on YouTube, you'll see black and white bits at the top. You can actually read that information, and it's never mind. So interlaced was old broadcast, and they would scan these lines, and go like this. And that's why when you see some of my old work with cartoon, which I'll tell you guys about later, my job was to transcode old video and put it on Netflix and YouTube. So that was my job from 2010 or 2008, 2010 until we launched in 2012. I was on the small team of people who created TV Everywhere for you to be able to watch TV on your phone 12 years ago. And we had to take interlaced video and turn it into progressive, which is 1080p. So if it's 1080i, that's whatever half of 1080 is, a 540 and 540, and they go together, and that's where you see the little zigzag lines. Everything we're working with is going to be progressive. So Hillbilly Chic's question was, interlace, is that the same as intra-frame? And intra-frame is your reference frame in your codec. So that is completely different things.
Yeah, seeing some great responses out here. Final Cut Pro for Mackenzie Lumbermill. The Dad Cave says CyberLink Power Director. Everman Bill says Resolve 17.
Power Director, Resolve. What was the first one?
Final Cut Pro.
Okay. I'm assuming people who say Final Cut Pro, it's Final Cut Pro 10. We doubt we have anybody left over from 8 years ago, 10 years ago with Final 7, which I am one of those folks, sadly.
FCPX.
Yep. Final Cut Pro 10.
Justin Woodwork says he uses InShot.
Hey, all right on. I was wondering if I was going to have an InShot person in here.
Yeah. So that looks like our entry so far for that.
Okay. Cool. So any questions I want to hit before we move on? I hit Hillbilly Chic's interlaced and interframe.
So Everman Build says this may get or have been covered by the time this is read. Can you do a crash course in ISO and white balance and how to do it properly?
Yeah, I'll cover it. And again, this is in Suman's video from January. He gets really deep into it, but I'll give a quick synopsis of this. Hold on, let me write it down. Can you leave that question up for a minute so I can go back and reference it? All right. So ISO is sensitivity. Back with analog photos, we had certain speed film, 100, 200, 400, 800, 1600. I mean, hell, I think there was even 3200 for people who did, Starry Night kind of stuff. Your film speed on analog 35 mil film showed the sensitivity of it and how fast your shutter speed needed to be. If it was more sensitive, then obviously you couldn't shoot in daylight. It was meant to get dark. That carried over into the original DSLRs from 2004. It was the 5D Mark II, I think, was the first to do 1080 video. And they took the sensitivity of the sensor, the CMOS sensor. So there is a CCD is a charge coupled device, or CMOS, or micro four thirds, or whatever. And we can talk about that if you'd like to go that deep. The sensor itself has a sensitivity level. Now, in video, it's actually called gain, because there is no sensitivity level. The sensor isn't a variable sensitivity it's not like changing out to different film. It's how much gain you can add. If you've ever tried to add gain or volume to a Discman, for those of us that are old, or an iPod plugged into a stereo, you hear a lot of noise. Well, the same thing happens in video, that a sensor, an image sensor, is only so sensitive. And when you up your ISO, you are actually increasing the gain, which is pink noise, which it's just trying to figure things out. So if you ever notice if you are in a dark situation and you turn up your gain, then in these little shadow areas, it's not black, it's red, green, blue, and all those sort of things. So certain cameras have better ISO. I use ISO as my variable, and I lock my aperture at the most shallow depth of field I have. And then my shutter speed is set at twice my frame rate. So if I'm shooting 29:9:7, which is 30 frames, again, go back to drop frame a few minutes ago, then I'm going to set my shutter speed at 60. If I set my shutter speed at 30 and my frame rate's at 30, then it causes all sorts of artifacts, jittering. It's called the exposure triangle. ISO, aperture, shutter speed. Just put it in your notes, Google the exposure triangle, and that will help you understand ISO. For white balance, understand your eyes automatically white balance constantly. If you've ever noticed that you walk outside on a really bright day and you've been cooped up and everything's really blue for a minute, and then your eyes adjust, the light outside, even though it seems natural with daylight, it actually has color tints to it. So when you white balance, and there is white balance, black balance, and gray balance. On high-end cameras, you actually have, like mine only has white and black. If I went up to the next model, I'd have white, black, and gray. When you white balance, what it does is it takes a sample, and you need to have a card that is pure white. Now, this is a white balance card that has a grid, which helps with resolution. When you white balance, what it does is it shows, RT, will you throw up my side window real quick? And you can go full screen with it and kill our cameras in the question just for a moment. All right. So on this screen, I have a card that while I was shooting, I threw this card, I just held it up. All right. And on here, I have my colors. You know, you've got your red, green, blue. Then I have yellow, cyan, magenta. I have skin tones, and have 100% white, 100% black, and then grayscale. Now, I have shot this. I knew what my color temperature was because I control my lights. I use 5600K lights. If I had shot this with tungsten lights, then it would look like this. Now, if you went back and forth, eventually your eyes would adjust to where this looks white if you looked at it long enough. But compared to a piece of footage that was shot in daylight, it might look blue. So by proper white balancing, you have told the people at home that if you're looking at this white countertop, it is actually white instead of blue or yellow. It's to counteract daylight colors versus tungsten yellow colors. So that is the importance of white balance. And we can go back to full cam now, sir.
Yep. So I got another question for you.
All right.
If you were done answering that one.
Yes, sir.
So Mackenzie Lumbermill, Sandy says, what are your thoughts on releasing a 1080 instead of 4K? I live in the middle of nowhere, a small village. My internet is not so great.
Perfect question. So Suman actually talked about this in his video, and I hate that I keep referencing back, and I hate that he's not in the chat for me to help him feel. I hope he does go back and watch this. we are opposing where he says stick with 1080. I shoot in 4K, I edit in 4K, I export out in 4K. When I edit in 4K, I use proxy files. We'll talk about that here in a minute. Make sure I come back to proxy files. So let's call it future ready. In college, I went to college in the mid 2000s in 05, and we were right on the edge of HD. And I had this, you can't see it, but my very first HD camera is up here on a shelf. It was 1080, shot on mini DV tapes. And my cooking show, the broadcast was 480. Like, we didn't have HD broadcast, especially not on my campus closed circuit TV station. For my cooking show, we shot in 480, 4x3. I had the ability, not the wherewithal or the forethought to do it. I had the ability to shoot in 1080 in 2005. I could have shot in 1080p or 1080i, and I didn't. And so now, 15, 17 years later, that footage is still 4x3, 480. I could have had 1080 in my archive of 17-year-old footage, and I screwed up. So now I shoot at the highest resolution possible because, let me add a caveat to that. When I shoot, I follow my instructions from last week. I don't let a camera roll. I only record exactly what's needed. The slate, my footage, maybe a slate at the end. And so I keep my length small, and I can always downgrade to 1080 if it's useless content, but I don't want to lose it. So I will shoot in 4K. When I come into my nonlinear editor, I will edit in 720 that's blown up. It's called a proxy file. I'm not going to show you in your specific editors, but Google how to make a proxy file in whatever your editing app is. And what happens is it leaves the interface as 4K, but I'm only actually editing a 720 video, so my computer runs a whole lot faster. And then only at the final, even my proxy renders or my rough cuts are going to be exported at 720, even though it's technically a 4K. My final render, the one that last night took an hour and a half on a 16-core machine to do, that one's in 4K, and then I just hit upload. I didn't hit publish. I let it upload for 2 hours because I'm doing 4K at one point I was doing 70 megabit when YouTube only needs 5 megabit. Like, it is absolute overkill. But instead of me taking, and I know somebody at some point is going to write this comment in the chat, uploading 4K and downgrading to 1080 is a viable option. But if I put 1080 at a 30 megabit bit rate, it will look better than 4K at a 10 megabit or a 10 bit rate. I'm hoping that explained everything without being too incoherent.
Yeah. So looks like Suman has joined us. So
let me get to AJ built this real quick, because yes and no, you are correct in this. Yes and no. It does prioritize when you export 1080 to 4K. I'm not getting into it tonight, but there are in your renderer, your exporter, your media encoder, there is a function you need to make sure you check, because there's 3 different ways to blow up 1080 to 4K. Sometimes it just makes 4 pixels, which is the old school way to do it. It just, because 4K is 4 times 1080. There are new processes where it uses AI to actually make your 1080 footage real 4K, not artificial 4K. So yes, I agree with them there, but it's also cheating. It's like watching a 1980s cartoon or watching The Simpsons on Disney Plus in 1080. Like, it still looks it, but it is the best way. If you uploaded your 1080 footage at 20 megabit instead of blowing it up to 4K and dealing with that, the differences will be extremely minimal. They are there. He's right. But for the layman, I would say up your bit rate of your export in your H.264.
Yep. All right. Well, let's do a giveaway.
All right.
Let me share.
And yes, to Suman and those, we are going to talk about file storage, and there is a lot to be said about the 4K. If it is a 4K video that doesn't mean anything, then as soon as I drop it, it goes into my media encoder, and inside of my media encoder, I can actually cut the heads and tails off, drop it to 1080. So a 5 gig file that was a minute and a half is now a 1080 file that's only the exact information I need, and it could be 150 megabytes. So if you are going to do the 4K thing and you have low real estate in your RAM, hard drive, CPU, etc., be smart about your footage. I'm not saying blanket do everything in 4K. I'm saying I do everything in 4K because I plan everything ahead of time.
So I hope everybody's got their entries. Remember, this is for the blue snowball on a boom, microphone on boom. And if you win, you agree to pay the shipping cost. And I appreciate Joseph offering this as a giveaway. So we will draw, and to win, you had to have hashtag NLE as well as the nonlinear editor that you use in your video production. So we're going to start collecting comments. All right, there were 6 entries, and let's draw a winner. Hey, the Dad Cave.
All right.
All right, Jay.
Dad won snowball. So hold on. So Hillbilly Chic, I just want to hammer this in one last time. Phones, monitors, etc., are not capable. It was at 740 was the timestamp on if you needed RT. Most people view YouTube on their phones. You are absolutely correct in that. I upload in 4K as a flex because most people are watching it on their phone. I shoot and save everything in 4K because when we get to 16K, VR, AR, and all the crazy things coming in a few years, you're going to wish if it was a good video. If it's useless birthday stuff, shoot it in 720. Nobody cares. Most of your news broadcast is in that. So yes, you are correct. Why even do it? It's because you're thinking of your future you if they need that. If you are shooting B-roll that could be used again 5 years from now, you're going to wish you had 1080 at a high bit rate in your repository. And again, opinions are what they are, right?
Yeah, your
future self will thank you.
Future thinking there. All right, so Simon says I shoot in 4K for my own vanity. The people watching don't care.
Pretty much.
Well, they don't care today, right?
They don't. It's future ready. Again, I can kick myself for not shooting in it when I had 1080 back then, and I like FOMO worse than anything because I still have all those tapes here, and it hurts when my host, the guy who was my host, has been my best friend for 17 years ever since that first shoot. And I haven't, I'll save it for another broadcast when I come on. I'll tell you guys my story. But if you've ever watched an Adult Swim cartoon or CNN show on Netflix or Hulu, that was my claim to fame years ago. Like doing the transcode, the upload, the year after iPhone was announced in college, I had hacked my school's iTunes and put a cooking show onto an iPod Classic and onto it was something ridiculous, and a whole lot of other stuff happened after that. Ended up at Turner Broadcasting doing some really cool stuff.
All right. So we addressed Sandy's question about 1080 versus 4K. And did we get to Hillbilly Cheek?
That's a good question. No, absolutely not. I am unbelievably lazy when it comes to this. So what she's at is, it's chic or chick. I feel like it's chic, and I'd hate to say chick if it's not. So Hillbilly, so what Hillbilly's asking here, do I always use the card, and do I use a LUT? So a LUT is a lookup table. If you're shooting in RAW, it is a very, and I'll put it up here on the screen for you here in a minute, it is a very neutral, low contrast picture. It doesn't look as high contrast as this, because what you're seeing is very processed down the line. So no, I do not use this. I honestly, that footage with the card was shot only for this video. If I'm shooting in a place that I don't have control over, i.e. this studio, my studio at work, or my studio in the wood shop, if I am shooting in a place for the first time, I will carry this. And especially if I have a new actor that I'm working with, I will always get at least this little card. I'll get a setup picture the first time I record with them, so that I can match their skin tone, which I have another card that's more skin tones on it. I will use that one time, so I have that footage, and I'm only recording it for 30 seconds, which is getting me the nat sound, which again, in the Joe Jack's video that launched this morning, you'll understand nat sound. But I'm getting nat sound, I'm getting white balance temps, skin tone temps, and then I'm getting my wheel, which we'll talk about here in a minute when we go into our NLEs. For LUTs, I haven't used a LUT in a long time because I don't have anybody with me, and I don't care what the raw footage looks like. I know that I'm shooting with my zebra and peaking. Again, go back to Suman's video in January. He explains that. But I'm watching for my focus peaking or my zebras for exposure. And at that point, because I have control, I don't need a LUT. I haven't even set up a LUT for these videos. I'm actually just shooting Rec 709. I'm not doing anything raw at the moment. The file sizes were just ridiculous for YouTubers. So if you want to talk about 4K and uploads, talk about shooting RAW and Rec 709. That's a waste in our space, shooting in RAW, unless you're epic like Jocko. Like, that's some gorgeous stuff. But I digress.
Yeah, thank you, Hillbilly Chic. I apologize if I've said that wrong in the past. And Everyman Builds, did we cover this?
Yep.
Crash, yes.
Yep.
All right, we got another question that's come in from 413 or 413.
Mm-hmm.
Furniture Builds. I only have the Osmo Action.
Yeah.
As a GoPro. Are they at least a
desert camera?
Desert camera? Decent camera, maybe?
Decent. Oh, no. That's easy. I actually was, that was going to be one of the giveaways tonight, was a GoPro pack and that. I get this question a lot. Your phone that's in your pocket is all you need. And again, Suman covers that. Your phone, if you had a phone in your pocket 3 years ago, it's better than a $10,000 camera from 10 years ago. I start people with their phones, shoot with your phones. Forget about the GoPro is an action camera. It needs lots of light. If you go back to what we just talked about with the ISOs and gain, GoPro is horrible indoor. It has a permanent fisheye. That software is unfisheyeing. So if you actually zoom in on your GoPro into the corners, or if God forbid you ever have to do a pan shot, GoPros are meant for action sports. That's what they were invented for. That's what they're meant for. Anything that's in the controls in pro controls are software based. Have a camera. If you're going to go software based, use your iPhone, preferably one of the pros, and go into pro mode on that. And you can go back on my Instagram when I was at the NAB conference a month ago, and I showed a $90,000 iPhone case, which was essentially a Panavision lens on the front of an iPhone. It is ridiculous what an iPhone can do. Don't waste your time on a GoPro unless you are putting it in a place that it can be sacrificed to the camera gods. Not to say get rid of it. I have 6 GoPros in here from, oh gosh, I've got more than that if you go back to GoPro 2, but I put them in places that I would never put a phone or my FS5 or FX3 or any of those sort of things. So it is not a decent camera for anything but home movies.
Yep. Did we address the any organization tips?
Let's do it. So go ahead
right.
and throw up my screen share, and we'll go into organization tips. All right. So file structure. If you right now asked me to go and find a video like John put in there, if anyone is using B-roll from 5 years ago, I use B-roll that I shot 15 years ago. And if you asked me to find that footage right now, it would take me a minute, but I could find it. So all of my folders have a specific, now some of these are messed up because it's a share with my team at work, but the way that it goes, let me find one of the easy ones. I should have been better. All right. So in here, I have the year, the month, a 3-letter encoding for what it is. Is it a podcast? Is it a training? Is it YouTube? Is it whatever? And then the group that it's for. So here in my wood shop, it would be YouTube. I'm doing a 101 series right now, like boot camp. So it's YT 101. And then is it video, audio, cameras, tripods, NLEs, etc. And so I have 3 designations. Inside of every single folder is the exact same folder structure. I start with my imports. I go 01 imports. So every folder, if you came in here, they're going to have the same pieces in it. And even if it only has one of them, I don't need to make an 06 character animator for everything, but in each one are imports. Assets are, so imports is your recorded audio, your recorded video, anything that you've done yourself. Assets for me is anything I've gotten from somebody else, or that's a graphic. Now, you know, whenever John did his, or whenever he came in with it, those do go into imports, and there's some fudging to this. But I have my import folder. Then I have for Premiere Pro, this is where it's going to be the main project. And then all of my backup versions, because if I mess something up, you know, I hit undo too many times and realize it 4 days later, I can actually go into old projects, pull out that effect, that thing, and then actually have both projects open at the same time, and then bring it to the new one. After Effects files and any After Effects stuff, Cinema 4D, and then I might have Adobe Character Animator and whatever else. But every folder, yours doesn't have to match this, as long as you are consistent in everything you do. So here's a crazy one for the 6 videos that are up right now. These are all the different exports, and then I have the exports that went to Instagram. And then for the imports, the episode I just finished was audio. And then inside of here, if it's from the Zoom, and each file has, like, I can tell, because this is my naming structure, that this is YouTube, the 101 series, episode 4, scene 4, the second part of scene 4, this is take 1. And then this clip 094 matches the raw metadata from my camera. So if you ask me to go find what I was looking for, then I know that when Izzy came on, that's his. When Suman came on, you know, that's his. Same thing from John. That in 7 years from now, if I, for some god awful reason, wanted to talk about the Rode wireless mic Go thing again, I've got John's footage and I can find it. That is file structures. And then my in my NLE, I actually have them laid out the same way, which is not in this one because this is just a one-off. But that folder structure that's here is mirrored in my bins. These are called bins. Almost every NLE calls it a bin. And these will match to where I have an O1, etc. in my bins. Whew, that was a lot. But yes, folder organization is huge. And then whenever I archive, there is functions in any good NLE to where you create dependencies, collect files, shrink project. I can't remember what's called in DaVinci, but there's a button in every nonlinear editor that it will package the video, your project, and only keep the footage you used. So in this last video, in one scene, I kept getting tongue-tied and I had 12 takes of it, and I only took take 12. I will actually consolidate that footage when it's time, when I'm done with my 101 series and it's time to put it into my archives, both in the cloud, locally. I've got backups on top of backups, which we'll talk about. When I collect this 300 gigabyte file, will actually consolidate down to about 80 by the time I'm done. And the rest of it, if I need to keep that 4K, then I'm going to transcode it and put it into deep storage, just not at 4K, all intra frame, that stuff that I talked about, what feels like an hour ago.
So where do proxy files come into this mix?
All right. So a proxy file, and I'll be quick with this, just so we can get to more questions. Proxy editing, when you import your A-roll footage, let's just say I'm doing talking to this camera, forget about B-roll. That A-roll, which is the majority of my timeline, is 1080, all intra frame, like it's a heavy video for my little machine. I can create a proxy, Google it for whatever your nonlinear editor is, and a lot of them, you don't have to click anything but make a proxy, and it will run an encoder in the background while you're doing your work, takes that 4K 30 megabit video and drops it to whatever you set it. You could set it at 720. Hell, you could set it at 480 if you don't care to read anything in the text. And that proxy is what you are actually editing with. And you can even export with that potato quality video until you say replace proxy for final render and let that machine just bake. So proxy editing is using a smaller file just for editing purposes and replace it with a big old thing at the very end.
And that's just so that it keeps the stress off of your computer and makes editing faster?
Correct. It makes your, if you've ever tried to hit play and your computer just go a frame at a time, you need to be using proxy files because your computer cannot keep up with your footage. Or you have not set your timeline, sequence, project, whatever you call it in your NLE, you have not set your timeline's settings to whatever your native footage is. 2997, 1080, 23976, 24, whatever. It is out of sync.
Okay. Looking at comments here.
I feel like I
see
killed off a lot of
this.
comments. I apologize.
Hillbilly Chic said phones and most monitors aren't capable of 4K. So why?
Yeah, we talked about that.
Okay.
Yep. Because we can even talk about 444, 420 and that, because your monitor doesn't even, well, your television doesn't see 42 or 444, but your computer might. So why even do that? Again, it's, if you can and you understand how, it makes the difference. Each little bit just makes you look a little bit better.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about this motion graphics that you've agreed to build as a professional. You've agreed to put something together for one of our viewers.
Yep.
But they, and from what I understand, that could be a stinger or a lower third. What's a lower third?
So any sort of graphics, what I'll do is whatever, as long as you have a vector logo, I'll make at least a 3-part package of your graphics, however deep you want to go into it. Lower thirds is exactly what this is. So right now, this question you have is a lower third because it's in the lower third of this. This is a bug, a logo, etc. The splash at the beginning is called a stinger, which we've talked about. We're not using that stuff anymore, but you might want it for your end title card of the video. And if you go over to the full screen, I'll show people the one that I did for you, or go over to my screen share. I apologize. And so this is in, let me get my camera. So this is in Cinema 4D. And what I've done is, if I can get my, shoot, I can't get my mouse to work. I took RT's logo and then made a virtual set and then lit it. And this is at the beginning of the stuff today is this thing. And so I just took his logo and made this little background graphic. And then if I wanted to animate it, I could make this little light flicker. And the idea is this could be a backdrop. And then the backdrop that he's using even today was created in this software. We don't have to go this far into it. We can do After Effects stuff, but I can make you pop up graphics or anything along those lines.
Awesome. So if you'd like to win that, you need to put in the chat hashtag pre, as in hashtag PRE, and then tell us in that chat message 2 of the steps of pre-production as Joseph talked about last week. So think back to his multiple steps of pre-production and tell us 2 of them, and make sure you have the hashtag PRE, and we will draw that name in a few minutes. Got another question here from Sandy.
Mm-hmm.
Just hired a new editor. Can you give me some tips to provide her with A-roll, voiceover, and B-roll? Give it to her in 4K. She uses Premiere Pro.
Let's say when you start, before you've shot the first thing, make sure that you have a plan, exactly what we talked about. And I know you saw me hammer it in last week, so I don't have to harp on anything, but I'll gloss over it real quick. You have your, I don't know if I'm giving this away yet or not, but you have your 4 parts of pre-production that we've talked about. Knock those out. If you have, then you have your cut list and your blueprint, which is your storyboard and your shot list. And that shot list is, when you fill it out properly, you have put the file names hopefully on there to give to your editor, and they either looking at the outline, the shot list, the storyboard, whichever one of them, even just a script or just an outline, they know what needs to go where. So when you give them the content, it all depends on if you are in the same room or not. If I'm in the same room, I might have a NAS, a network attached storage, if my network can support it. I might have, I would recommend something like Dropbox and getting the 3 terabyte account. Dropbox works very well with distributing files, and as long as you have the proper file structure, just like what we just talked about, that editor will know exactly where to go and find things. And then when they find, all right, clip 094 is scene 2A section B, and in the line, boom, all of that goes. If I am in the cloud or even local NAS, I have stored the video on that spot. That Dropbox is mounted as a drive on my local computer, and a 3 hard drive system is your best setup. You have your C drive or your main if you're on a Mac. You have a secondary drive, which is all of the files, the projects. So that's where you'd have your Dropbox mounted. And then you would recommend having a third hard drive that's all on an SSD connection, either through USB-C, USB 3.1, 3.2, etc. And that third one is where the cache goes, cache, not cash money. And by doing that, now one bus of bandwidth is pulling the files to be edited. Another one is holding the cache that can be easily dropped. And then your main hard drive for the computer is just for the operating system. By doing that, it actually makes, especially After Effects, work a whole lot quicker. So you need to establish a system that can change. You don't have to be concrete the very first time you do it, but have a system that everybody agrees to. Keep it organized, follow your cut list, your shot list, and communicate up and down. The editor is the artist in this. The editor has control. When they say fix it in post, the editor is fixing it in post. And when you shoot for the edit. Shoot knowing what the edit's going to look like. When Suman gave me, and John, when they gave me their cut-ins for this video, I sent them a rough cut so they knew exactly where the graphics were, and they shot exactly off-centered where I needed them to be. And they shot with the edit in mind because they knew exactly how I needed it framed up. Do the same thing if you're relying on somebody else to edit.
Great advice. I think the light bulb came on a couple of times there in the past few minutes with file storage and how to label and save things. So that's excellent. Let's go ahead and do our giveaway. And this is of Joseph agreeing to make you a motion graphics items. And this is very high value and of great value to you. So let's go over here. We will do hashtag PRE, and we are looking for that as well as the 2 steps of pre-production in your comment for you to win this package. So here we go. Collecting comments.
I'll work with you on whatever your NLE is, except for InShot. I'll have to figure out how to get it for if I think it was Justin. I can't remember who was. Yeah, Justin's doing that. Yeah. So if it's for him, I'll figure out how to get it to him.
Here we go.
There you go.
Oh. All right. Congratulations.
All right, hold on. I got to write that down.
That confetti.
Woodified. I like that name. MoGraph pack.
Cool stuff right there.
All right. Oh, man. I apologize for getting it. I love this stuff. I apologize for getting excited. I hope I'm not yelling and blowing out your speakers. I enjoy this. I've been doing it for 17 years now, and I get fired up. I wish you could feel my blood pressure right now. I love getting people into video.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. All right. So we're already over the hour point, but let's go a few more minutes on whatever topic you want to cover, Joseph, and then we'll do the giveaway of the Rode Video Mic Pro.
And I mean, I can keep going. I don't want to keep people. I know you want to keep it in that package. I will say when you get into your nonlinear editor, do memorize and understand your keyboard shortcuts. I don't know what the statistic is, but it's a ridiculous multiplier of how fast you are when you do your keyboard, when you understand your keyboard shortcuts. I'm going to do two quick things, and you guys can vote what you want to see now. Do you want to understand introductory color grading, or do you want me to reveal how Jackman does some of his tricks? So throw it into the chat. We'll see what folks like. It's going to be After Effects, so you might not have the application, but I can show you how Jackman does his stuff, or we can do intro to color grading that works in about any NLE.
Yeah, I think the stream is several seconds behind our comments.
Yeah.
So we'll give them a minute to do this. But for me, I think both things would be interesting. What you were showing me earlier, being able to do the trick with the paintbrush and so forth, adding interest to your videos. And some people are hesitant to even try that kind of thing because you think that that's so high tech.
Well, I'll try to hurry through. So right now it's a 50-50. Mackenzie wants the tips and tricks on doing. Yeah, well, I mean, if we're good on time, I can try both, but I'll hurry up real quick. I'll do real short of both. Let's do a full screen on my computer, and let's start with color grading. All right, so when you've done your footage, let's say that you had the wherewithal to start ahead and do some sort of mouth breather shot. Man, look at that gaping mouth. So I have, man, why is my Windows all foobar here? So I have my raw setup is not white balance. This is, as it came out, like an idiot, I left my tungsten overhead lights on. I had, which is giving me the shine here. I've got, this is a mess. Well, in every application, there is an auto. Boom, auto, it'll read it, kind of fix things. Immediately it looks better. And it's kind of weird. I can see it on the monitor, on the feed, and it's not as cool. But let's go back. Let's say I knew that I had too much tungsten here because I had incandescent lights mixed with daylight colored lights. Well, I can come over, grab my white balance, click anywhere that's supposed to be white. I know that's wrong because of the tungsten lights. Let me try again. And then I know this is supposed to be white. And then boom, it's a little bit better, but I'm closer to white balance. Oh, I have a white balance card. Let's do it. Come here, click white. Now it is perfectly white balanced for the studio cameras. I still have this orange hue because I forgot to turn off my normal shop lights. Well, in here, I have, when I'm doing my color grading, I have my card. I'm going to kind of get into it. And I'm not going to go full on color grading. I'm just going to show you what scopes are. So you have scopes here as your vector scope, your waveform, and let me add a histogram here so you can see a histogram. So these are the values on 8-bit. I won't go too far into this, but we are shooting 8-bit, which is 2 with an exponent of 2 8 times. So there's a value, there's 256 values available, red, green, and blue. Of those 256 values available, the white ones the white is currently way overexposed. See how it's crushing the top? And the blacks are about at 15. So I know that I'm overexposed. If I drop my exposure, look at the top values, which are most of these right here. Here, let me zoom in a little bit more so we just have the color card. You don't want to do it based on the color card, and I'll show you why here in a second, but it helps with the visuals. So my white stuff is way too high. So if I bring my exposure down, I want to do it to where it's not necessarily crushing. I can crush the top, but I don't want it to be like over. So I'm just going to bring it there. But notice my shadows are way, like this is almost a gray. So I can come here and bring, actually, let me bring my shadows down first. I can bring my shadows, and all I'm trying to do is get this bottom bits down into closer to the bottom. So I'm bringing that down. Now, let's say I needed to bring all of this stuff closer together. I want my white and black to be closer together. Well, if I lower the contrast, everything comes together, which makes this darker, this lighter, it's a bunch of grays. But if I beef up my contrast, you'll see it spreads them apart. So now, let's say I'm doing a basic grade. I want this to be right around 90%. So let's set my high side 90%. Let's set my blacks to where I'm not crushing too much. So I have a fairly even bit here for my saturation in your vector scope, which is about color. I know my reds are hitting there. My yellows are just about perfect. And I'm crushing my blues, which is fine. Like, I don't care about that. This line right here on there is skin tone. It is the blood pigment. It doesn't matter what your actual skin tone is. Everybody, from the most pale person to the darkest person you've ever met, all their skin tone shows up on this line, because this is called the blood line. And this, you want to, if you have, like, if I zoom out to where I'm, too far. Sorry. I'm on 3 monitors here, so stuff likes to jump. Here, let me just reset. Then on here, you will actually see, if I was more prominent in here, I'd come up on that line. So I'm going to show you what that quick little bit did by getting this stuff to come in. So there is with it on, and there's off. And all I did was set this up against the card at about a 90% run. I can go in deeper than this and do all sorts of different stuff. I can come in here and hit my curves. So say I go back to my basic. Let me just put this stuff back towards the middle a bit. I'm going to go to my curves. And all I'm going to do is bring the highlights up just a hair. I'm going to bring this down a hair. And boom. There's the difference, just by adding that little curve. John, Lincoln Street, can you put in the chat if you'll let me use your footage that you sent me? If you can just put a yes or a no, if I can use that footage you sent. But right there is your basic color grading with this chart. You can get these charts for like $15 on Amazon. I actually built a web page for this live stream, and I put a link on there. But if you just go and Google it, they are DGK color cards. They're like $15 for a 2-pack of them, and they're great to just have for this purpose. So color grading 101, that's your basic stuff. Honestly, you can hit your auto and it does great. And then I love vignette. It kills off the focus on the outside. And if it's daylight vignette, you can lighten it up. But I like to do that. If you watch the new video on Joe Jack's YouTube, you'll see it just kills the focus where you don't want it to be. All right.
Yeah. So Sandy's asking, if I shoot in the shop, I should get one of those cards for my editor?
So the cards are industry standard. Like the cards are for in production. If you tell the editor which card you're using, then if that editor knows, like when you buy the card, you can Google it. There's all sorts of different things to do with the symbols on it. But as long as you tell the editor which card you're using, then they know how to set things up. But they are all red, green, blue, cyan, yellow, magenta, and skin tones for the most part. So the card is for your camera and production crew. It's not for your editor. Everything should be perfect. And in your camera, some cameras will have color bars in them. So when we used to work in tape-based, we had to record 60 seconds of 1 kilohertz tone and color bars so that when, I think I have a color card on here. It would import color bars. So I've made a mess of this. So if I take my file, throw it over here, put it in my timeline. So this is, these are SMPTE color bars. So if I do that and open up my scopes, you'll see that on this vector scope, if this was correct, like it's a little off hue, but these should fit into these realms. There's red, green, blue, cyan, yellow, magenta, all of my black scale, and these are SMPTE color bars that your camera outputs. Whew. Okay. So I'll go ahead on to this real quick. So here's the video. I don't think I have audio turned on, so you might not be able to hear it. So the first example is Paul Jackman drop off. What? He's waiting on you to move. Oh, my bad. Yeah. Can y'all hear it at all? He says, this is the drop off. The one guy looks, the other one says, I need you to move. And he takes off. So the first example. All right. So what this is, the original video of this, open up, is, it's masked. But the video was me. It took thought. I had to map it out. I actually had 3 takes that I did the first one right, and the other ones I did backwards. But I went into the shop and did that, did the take. I went and I kind of counted it out and then made sure while I was shooting that I didn't pass this line. I made sure I didn't pass this line, and I made sure I stayed here, and then counted to give myself the movement, talked. So I fulfilled each role. And then I created 3 different timelines, or 3 different assets in the timeline: the left person, the right person, and sorry, I forgot, because the left person does a circle. We have the center one talking left, right, and then when the left person comes around the camera to drop this off. And so the base video is here. This one, and what's great about Jackman, I told him this at Workbench Con, he's a magician because I can't see his seams. Now that I've showed you this, you can see my seams, especially if I did color grading. But you are masking, and then my mask changes as I go. So this is the loop coming around, and you can see that this video, if I cut, boom, boom, and cut this off, you can watch the video go. So there's my arm, and it's keyframes, and then he goes out. If I turn just this one on, then you can see him come in, and he's right there, and then he goes out. If I turn this guy on, then I'm standing there, and then it goes out, and then he comes back in. And that is how that shot is done. The other one is the magic brush, which I just saw Paul do in a video where his head goes and pops up. I didn't get this one done in time for you guys tonight, but you have to shoot it in reverse. So I'm essentially, the idea is I am going to pull paintbrushes out of the air and put them into my hand. But what it is you mask out the part that's dropping. And then this is a Photoshop layer where it's just the one brush, and you cut it off at the moment that you grab it and it goes in. And so that's called masking. I did a track mask on the latest YouTube video, but with that, I don't want to keep going if folks see if anybody has questions or if that's cool, or if you want to see any more funness of that. The next one.
So I lost connectivity and I missed the past couple of minutes. I don't think y'all even knew I was gone. So that's a good thing.
Well, I hate that I've missed you on that.
But I just, now I'm trying to catch up and see if anyone else has a question.
Oh, shoot.
So
I lost the footage. Sorry.
Sandy says she had an aha moment. Those are always good to have.
Did it do? I lost it. So I was going to do a wipe. I stuck this piece of wood. I was going to show how to do a cross wipe. We'll save it for another video. I'll do a whole one on anybody who wants to see After Effects stuff. I'll do a whole video on all this mess. Oh, keyframes. I hate that we're out of time, but I want to show you guys something really quick that is hugely important. Let's say that this was 4K footage that was a lock shot for the people who shoot with a GoPro. Keyframes, if you don't know, keyframes are the most important thing to learn what does. That's these little stopwatches. In every nonlinear editor, you have keyframes. It's what makes After Effects so great, is all these little bits are at this moment, do this action. So if I wanted to create a pan or a zoom, I can do keyframes. So this is a lock shot, but say I wanted to, I'm walking in, I want it to go from my face and follow me in. So I can come up here, and I'm just doing this really nasty right now to make a point. Go here, and then as I'm walking, it needs to end there and be zoomed in to follow my face. Look at that mouth breather. And so, boom, look at that. Just by adding that really fast keyframe, I have added motion to it. Now, this is a straight line, which feels kind of weird. If I take these and I turn them into a Bezier, it actually adds all these. It speeds up and slows down, because nobody starts running at a speed. It takes you a minute to speed up, and it takes you a minute to slow down. And so you want to do easy ease, which are these little Bezier lines. Checking the chat.
All right. So why don't we get to our last giveaway, start letting people put in the comments. So if you put in hashtag Jojax, that's hashtag JOJAQS, one of the future greatest channels on YouTube, Jojax, and then
don't tell them, because this is a prize for the people who were early.
And then put in what we told you about whenever we first started the program. So your key is hashtag JOJAQS, and then an explanation of what it is. What we covered with you early in the program, whenever we told you that we would be giving away the Rode VideoMic Pro to the winner, but you're responsible to pay the shipping. So I'll give you just a minute to do those. Remember, you need to put the hashtag and
they've been doing it. I saw
and the explanation all in the same chat comment.
Is there anything else anybody wanted while we're working on that? Oh, VBR and CBR while we're showing that. So when you go to export your video, you want to set up in your pieces constant bit rate and variable bit rate. Variable bit rate is for when you have static shots, lots of movement. Like if it's going to be different from static to lots of motion, variable bit rate allows the bit rate to fluctuate. Like if it's just a PowerPoint, it can make the bit rate low, but as soon as fast motion comes on, it can dynamically raise the bit rate. If you are just doing a talking head with hardly any move, if it's the same the whole way through, you can just set this at constant bit rate. If you know it is just football sports, or if it's just a talking head, if it's just a screen grab, save yourself processing time and set it as a constant bit rate. But if there's some fast motion and some just static shots, and you can set it as variable bit rate, the VBR is, it uses machine learning, processing, AI, all those big buzzwords. And then 2-pass means it just does it twice. Same file size.
Awesome.
Dad Cave, I'll say Bitcoin. I'm on Ethereum. You can just send me a coin and that'll take care of shipping charges. No, I'll message you. Well, I'll find a way to get a hold of you guys to work, get this taken care of.
All right, let's share our giveaway tool.
Man, I'm realizing how many things were on this list that I wanted to cover tonight, and I did not get to it. I was going to do track mats, motion trackers, slates. All right, sorry, go ahead.
No, let's collect our comments. Looks like there were 5 entries. Let's see if we can draw one that has both components to win. You got to have the hashtag JoeJacks and what we told you about early in the program. What if
I guess we'll give them a choice and let a backup one go. Let them choose which they want, if it's the graphics or the mic.
Yeah.
And then let
what would you rather have, the graphics or the mic? You get to pick one. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what Fud says.
Let's see what else. While he's doing that, let me see if I can track mat. Oh, can I show that quick enough? Motion tracking. Ooh. Let me show that. Hold on. Before you go back to my screen. Don't save.
So what if I'd picked the graphics?
Okay. So we can do another one for the microphone.
Yep.
While it's going, I'm going to show a behind the scenes for the video that launched this morning. I don't want to give too much away, but I did a lot of motion tracking.
Okay.
All right. So in the video from earlier today, there is a scene. Hey makers, today's video is all about audio because video without audio is surveillance. In this video, where I'm showing and this is a credit to Saman. He's who gave me this idea to show the pickup pattern of the shotgun microphone. And he said, just put a lightsaber on the end. Are meant to pull from a long distance away. So you can actually have this about. And so in it, like I've burned off a piece of my mustache. I've got a little Bart doll that's on fire. My mustache, you'll see it go down here. I just was messing around. And the way this is done is, oh, if I can get this to go over. I am doing a motion track on the raw video. I took a points of contrast. So I grabbed at my eyes for the one that does my mustache. I hit one of my nostrils and the bridge of my glasses as one track, and it just is tracking that motion as I go. And then another track was on the actual microphone, and that's where I attached the light to it. That one. And so I just put points and tracked it. And then once you do that, you have another file, or this one I just did. Where's the shotgun? This. So I made a null, and then I just attached a red graphic to it, and then added smoke and sound effects to make it even crazier. And here is, oh, don't want to give that away. And a shotgun or rifle aids as high. Yeah. So this is all about audio. It's a fun little scene. All right, RT, that's it. From a long distance away. So you can actually have this about 5 feet away from you. All right, next draw. And we can't hear you or see you if you were talking.
So you couldn't hear me?
Couldn't hear you or see you.
Well, I just gave you all the explanations for everything that's important in the universe, and nobody was even paying attention. So I will keep that to myself from now on. Okay. No, I was just saying we'll go back and do it the right way and enter hashtag JoeJax, and we will collect the comments and we will draw. If Woodified gets picked again,
he's out.
He's we'll draw again.
He loses his first one if he gets pulled. No, I'm kidding. While this is going, is there any more questions? Anything else that you guys want me to cover on another time or hit up tonight? Hey, Appalachian Heritage.
All right, Appalachian Heritage. I do need to check their entry.
I'm looking. Not seeing it. Oh, from West Virginia.
Okay. I'm seeing the JoeJax, but I'm not seeing the
answer
to what we asked at the beginning of the program.
Yeah, I see that. All right. Got to go back.
I'm sorry, Appalachian. I appreciate you, but
this was a reward for being in since that beginning mess.
Draw again.
And I've got lots of stuff to give away, a lot of old equipment. So I promise I'll
Woodified, you need to go play the lottery.
I mean, it's only 6 people, but still.
All right, I'm gonna draw again.
All right. And after this, I'll find something for I'll figure it out. All right.
All right, one more time.
I've never seen. It's rigged. It's rigged. He just put it 18 times. It's like me stuffing the box. Whenever I do my business card drop, I'll put these wooden Baltic birch ones in, and I've won Total Boat Mess. I've won so many things. It's a cheat. I've quit doing it now. There we go.
Justin Woodworks.
Yeah, and he's the one with InShot. So I got it. Oh no, he's getting the microphone. That's right. Never mind. It's not the graphics. I was like, how am I going to do this? Oh, let me write that down.
Okay, Justin, you need to get with your mom and together contact
Yeah,
Joe
and
Jacks.
my email
Joseph.
is J-O, the Joe part of Joe Jacks, joe@joejacks.com. So anytime you guys want to get a hold of me, there's also, I made a webpage that was joejacks.com/ what channel are we on? Woodworking, WWYT.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, Justin,
No.
you didn't answer the question either.
All right. I think there was only 3 that actually did answer the question. And I'll do something for the folks who did answer it early. I'll go back through the chat and find them and do something nice. Like I'll do microphone and maybe another backup microphone. I'll see what I got. I'll make it worth your while. If you put it in, I got you covered. Because I think it was Mackenzie and somebody else had the original answer. They're both a winner. Just so we can move on and get on with it. And you guys can put on what else you want to learn on the next bit. And I've offered RT that I can come in anytime he doesn't have a guest and just do some fun. But.
Sounds good. So next week we've got Wood by Wright, James Wright coming on. So look forward to seeing everyone then. Joseph, any last comments?
Hold on, make sure I didn't miss anything. So the new audio video is up on Joe Jack's YouTube, went up this morning. Get on there, subscribe. Let me know what videos you think you need to go that I need to work on next. I'm going to start doing live stream consulting, where what we talked about last time. If you want somebody to critique your videos, not just tell you good or bad, but what you could do better, I'm going to start doing an hour package for folks. And then if I put you as part of my live stream, it's pro bono, as long as you don't mind me reaming you in front of the 6 people that'll tune in. But yeah, this has been unbelievably fun. I'm glad. I'm hoping somebody got something good out of this today.
Yeah, well, I know I did. And I appreciate it very much. And everyone needs to go check out Joe Jacks on YouTube and joejacks.com and keep that in mind. And like you said, we'll be in touch with the winners. Congratulations. And thank everyone for being here tonight. But as for me, my wife's calling. I got to go.
And I think it's easier for people to look at my story, for example, or anybody like in a similar story, and think that that was an easy decision. And I can't state how much that was a very hard decision for both my wife and I.
You know, I still do some from time to time now.
Okay. And what led you from that into video creation on YouTube?
Boredom.
What's the next step? What is the next thing? What's going to get you to that next place?
It wasn't like YouTube's good and, you know, this and that. Like, I was still pretty new to YouTube and didn't know that was sustainable long term. And so it was a gamble. And I'd worked for a long time to get in the position I was at. And it was a very, very hard decision to basically give that up for, you know, potentially the rest of my life.
With me being a business-minded individual and trying to make sure that I'm providing for my family, but also always growing.
It's really kind of sad because I didn't get involved even when he was doing the noodle boards. He pretty much did all that. I did everything in the house so that he could stay in the shop a lot.
I am a little conflicted, I think. It initially started off with just sharing like my sewing machines and sewing tips and stuff like that. And then it kind of morphed into sharing the Mastering Mayhem merch items that I was making. And then along the way, I kind of shared some DeWalt tool and obsessions that I've had.
Hats off to Ira. I mean, I can't imagine doing it with small kids. That's a lot of work.
Well, this is a little chaotic, so
My part really didn't start until Live Edge started. When we started Live Edge, I don't know, I felt different about everything. It felt real to me. I think everything started feeling real to him, you know, after the first few months because he was in the shop. It didn't really feel real to me until Live Edge started. And now I see this as my future too. I don't think I'll be a teacher much longer.
because I wasn't quite niched enough. But I think because my channel name is I Don't Even Work Here, I think I'm just going to roll with.
I'm going to put out some shorts for staging. Staging is simply where you make the piece of furniture or the item, whatever it is, if it's, you know, wall decor, whatever it is that you're making. It's just where you simply make it look like it belongs in a home.
I never even considered the second channel. I just think that all of my content needs to go where I am.
I'll always be that individual that loves YouTube, that always wants to do extremely detailed videos on how to build.
I was living in Charleston. This was back in, we're talking 2013, March 19th, 2013 was when I posted my very first video.
So think about what the kid actually wants. Try to come up with projects that are quick wins. Sometimes it's not even really hammering something or sawing something. Sometimes it's just simply gluing a couple things together and then painting it. Like, think like a kid.
I had talked to a lot of people in the area trying to find a woodworkers group. Any people that were building stuff, didn't even have to be woodworking, there just wasn't much of it. So a friend of mine suggested making videos on YouTube to reach out to other, meet other woodworkers, reach out to other people who were building things. And so I started checking it out, and that was really cool. I saw, back then it was Steve Ramsey, Mark Spagnolo, Laney Shaughnessy, and of course Matt's Basement Workshop. And they were kind of, those are really the four guys. I call them the four fathers. They're the four guys that really started the woodworking DIY thing on YouTube. Those were the guys that started it all. And then there was Matthias Wandel and John Heinz came along. And about the same time, Jimmy DeResta had started his thing, Bob Claggett, and I started about the same time, roughly within a year span there. We all started right around the same time, and it was just fun and exciting. I put a video up. It was the worst video that's ever been posted to YouTube. If you're hard on your videos, go check out my very first video ever. You won't feel so bad, I promise. But people commented, and I was interacting with them, and I took like another 2 months and I put up another video, and it happened again. People were, commenting and talking, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And between at those points, I was watching a lot of YouTube. It was ridiculous. I had done a lot of fishing because I had a lot of free time. So I've been fishing and watching YouTube videos. And I kind of saw that there was this gap in the market of things that, just these in the industrial side of making or furniture or other things, you tend to see a lot of things that you don't see in the DIY sector. And there's a lot of adaptations that I saw that were possible. So I took a lot of my knowledge from that side of the world and kind of adapted it to the DIY and just started doing a lot of crazy and wild things that people hadn't seen before on equipment that wasn't designed for it, but it worked.
I've had them different times throughout the course of 14 years for different projects and different things that I'm working on. Right now, the team members behind the scenes all have to do with my online courses, but everything else, as far as what I do for my channel, it's all me.
Doing the research is not necessarily going to be the fun part, right? And we had Mr. King on here a couple of weeks ago. He was talking about the research he did before he released a single YouTube short. Well, the research he did led him to putting together a video less than a minute, but there was many, many hours of research before that, but it led to 5 million views. So research can be very important. This is counterintuitive to a lot of the suggestion out there on YouTube where everybody says, just hit record. Just go out in the garage and hit record. And your viewpoint seems to be different than that. What do you say to those people that say, just hit record?
I'm glad you brought it up, RT. there's a lot of, I call them talking points that have manifested themselves for whatever reason in the how to grow space. The just hit record is probably one of the ones that drives me the most insane. I mean, you can go out and just hit record, but again, set your expectations for what you think the output and the end result is going to be. You get out of things what you put into them. And you may get lucky and you might catch a unicorn, but I'm going to bet 9 times out of 10, if you just go out and you hit record, you don't do any research, you don't have a plan, you don't have a rough script, you don't have a target audience, you don't have value that you're looking to provide. Again, I just think you're setting yourself up for unneeded frustration when a little prep and work up front can pay extreme dividends in the end. And you don't get a do-over when you post the video. Once it goes out into the interwebs, it's done. And you can't go back and redo the same topic right away because then you look like a goof.
I'm inspired by this guy. It's a little not fair because he does have a bigger, larger channel, but he has a smaller woodworking channel that's done pretty well this past year as well as in 2020. And his name is Robert Dunn.
Authenticity is something that I strive for all the time. I always try to just be myself, but everybody always says that. They always say, well, when you're on camera, just be yourself. But as soon as the camera goes on, you're never really yourself because you're always aware of the image that you're projecting, and then you're going to refine that further when you're editing it. At best, I think most of us are only, at best, maybe 80 to 90% ourselves. There's always that part that's carefully curated.
And he's hilarious. I think he is one of the best people in front of the camera in our space. His bigger channel is a car channel. I'm not going to kind of focus on that. But under Dunn, he has made a handful of videos this past year. Not nearly as many as he made in 2020, but he still racked in quite a few views. Especially, he had some videos over 100,000, some over 500,000. And what I really want to emphasize with Robert Dunn, even if you watch his Aging Wheels channel or Underdone, his woodworking channel, is his confidence, relaxation, and charisma. And it might come naturally to him, but I believe that everyone can work on charisma, and they can look at someone like Robert Dunn and get inspired.
And as far as working to become more natural on camera, that's just time. You just keep doing it. The more you do it, the more comfortable you get at it. And I do think it's important to, as much as I'm not really a fan of saying having the avatar behind the camera, I do think it helps to imagine that you're actually talking to somebody who will be watching the video. Sometimes it's easy to forget that you see numbers of people watching, but you forget that these are actual people watching your video on their phone or on their TV or wherever. And I think it's important to keep that in mind.